Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cold Hard Truth podcast. I'm Anish Gupta.
And I'm Jack Smith.
So today we are going to be a little bit steering a little bit away from the team-centric episodes and the record predictions. We're just going to give a little bit of a different type of prediction. I think Jack can agree to that. So we're basically going to give our predictions for which players will make their first Pro Bowl in 2020. So to keep this episode a bit short, we're going to pick one player from the NFC offensive side, one player from the NFC defensive side, and then for the AFC, same thing. One player on offense and one player on defense. So I'll give Jack the floor. We're going to start with the AFC, and you want to go with your offensive player for the AFC?
Yeah, so, when we were crafting our list, this was the first player I looked up because, I assumed that he had been in a Pro Bowl before. I just wanted to check. Obviously, he's new to the AFC, and I thought he had a Pro Bowl. Turns out he didn't. It's Stefon Diggs, the new wide receiver one for the Buffalo Bills. And I assumed that as Adam Thielen's, secondhand man in Minnesota, he had at least made a Pro Bowl once. But I was shocked. He has not made a Pro Bowl. He's the wide receiver one on a team I think is going to win their division. And I think the Bills could be really good this year. I think I had them in that tier 2 alone in the AFC because we talk about the tiers a lot. We've got the Chiefs and the Ravens at the top.
Yeah.
I've got the Bills as kind of a standalone second, just above the third tier, and then everyone else comes after that. But I think that the Bills can be very good. Stefon Diggs is the number one option for the first time in his career. Best route runner in the AFC, I'll say it right now. And I think he can be very productive in that offense. So I've got Stefon Diggs making his first Pro Bowl.
I think that's a great point. I mean, when Shriegar and I made our list, I think it was like a couple months ago now, just about the top 10 receivers in the AFC, I was just shocked as to how many good receivers are in the NFC side.
Yeah.
I mean, just to mention Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins. I think those are everyone's top 3, and they're all in the NFC, right? Devontae Adams, Mike Evans. Like, in my top 6, I only have one in the AFC, and that's Tyreek Hill. Like, I think it's just crazy to me the amount of, disparity we see. And even with cornerbacks on the AFC side, like, there's so many on the AFC side, right? There's Stephon Gilmore, Trey White, list goes on. I mean, Joe Hayden's another one. But to kind of attest to that, there's just a lot of disparity there. I mean, it's not obviously like handpicked and chosen. It's pretty random, but yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. So I think that's a great pick.
That's how we that's some of the stuff that goes into these lists is you've got to look at, what the Pro Bowl has been like the last couple of years, because there's positions that each league is kind of like their stalwarts at each position. So, I mean, the AFC wide receiver, I think, is the most open spot on the AFC Pro Bowl roster. And then I thought of Stefon Diggs, and boom, never made a Pro Bowl. So easy pick for me on that one.
Yeah, and before I get my pick, guys, we have a 200 subscriber goal, and we're pretty close to it. So I'd really appreciate you guys to hit that subscribe button. So now with that out of the way, I will give my pick. So I didn't do a receiver. I actually went to the running backs, and I thought this was probably one of the easier bets I would have made because obviously for AFC receivers, I think you guys would have known who I would have picked. I think Jack already guessed right away, Devontae Parker, but I could only take one, so I decided to go with Josh Jacobs. And the dude, I think, in my opinion, should have won Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Me too.
I think it was a snub, but also it was the fact that he didn't play all 16 games. But playing 13 games, right, and despite being, I would say he played hurt a little bit in some of them towards the end, I think. So he still managed 1,150 yards, 7 touchdowns. He had a decent amount through the air. I think it was like 160, but I think this is the year where he's going to be a full third down back. I think there's going to be less of Jalen Richard and more of Josh Jacobs. And this is his time to shine. I mean, like we've said before, I mean, the Raiders have pieces and their offensive line is stellar. So I think this is where Derek Carr I see a lot of dump downs maybe to Josh Jacobs in the receiving game. I see his receiving totals go up a lot as well. Maybe hits 400, maybe 500 receiving yards. I know that's not a lot for most running backs, but I think that's a big upgrade from 160, and I think Jack can attest to that.
Yeah.
So, and also I think Jack had his pick for rushing touchdowns, yeah. Josh Jacobs. I don't know if he hits that, but I definitely could see him hitting over 10 rushing touchdowns and potentially 1,300 rushing yards as well. I mean, he is set up for success there in Las Vegas. Whether they're down in games, whether they're up in games, they're going to utilize him. I think he's their best playmaker, so he's going to get touches. And on the AFC side, I think just from a Pro Bowl perspective, I think Chubb gets in. I think Derrick Henry are my 2 locks, barring injury, of course. And I think Jacobs gets in at that third slot.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I think he can unseat Mark Ingram from that spot last year. And I think that, I mean, you'll see an uptick in both receiving and rushing performance, I think, because obviously they didn't want to go all in with him his first year. And so I think second year, watch out for Josh Jacobs. I still have him leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns. And I was a little upset when you brought that one up because like, oh, I should have thought about that one. But I'm gonna stick with Stephon Diggs. I wish we could pick multiple. But and then I think speaking of picking multiple, I was really in between two guys for my AFC defensive player or AFC
Mhm.
defensive first player to make a Pro Bowl. Both second year players. I had Devin Bush from the Steelers, who I really considered, but I ultimately ended up going a little biased. But I went with Quinnen Williams, defensive tackle for my New York Jets. I think that just the reports I've been seeing out of Jets camp, Quinnen Williams is absolutely destroying things, and his confidence seems to be way up. And people forget he was the
Wait,
third
wait.
pick.
It's the same reports where the Jets lost 20 nothing to the backups, right? I'm just
Now,
making
we're
sure.
not talking about that, but yeah, but I mean, Quinnen Williams, people forget he was the third pick in the draft a year ago, and his senior year or his last year, sorry, at Alabama was ridiculous. And so he obviously still has that in him. And the reports out of Jets camp is that Quinnen Williams is back. And the reports from Quinnen Williams himself is he's got his complete confidence back. And I think that he's going to make his first Pro Bowl ever.
I think it's an interesting pick. I can see a little bit of bias there, but I mean, obviously, for a defensive tackle or interior defensive lineman, whatever he plays, I know he plays a bit of both. Wins don't really matter, and I don't see this Jets team being very good. But I think he can definitely set himself apart. The Jets already had a really good run defense last year, and I'm sure Quinnen Williams can be a big part of that going into next year. Because I remember we were talking about it. He didn't get as much time as he could have,
I mean, he started
and
9 games. Like that's not.
yeah,
He's going to
I
start
mean, I
16
agree,
if
but
he's
for
in.
a third
If he's
overall
healthy.
pick, right? I think you need to get. I mean, I expect a little bit more, but
Yeah.
like you said, Jack, right when we were talking about it earlier, I think he can add to that. I mean, I was a little bit skeptical, but I can see it. I think it's a very reasonable pick. Um, for me, at least, I think when I mentioned it, also Jack was kind of like, "Oh, why didn't I think of that?" This one kind of immediately came out to me was Justin Simmons, the safety for the Denver Broncos, and he's appearing on a lot of people's lists, and I'm really liking that. You know, just on their top 5, top 10 safety list. I'm glad he's getting the respect he deserves. Obviously, unfortunately, his peers did not give him the same type of love. He didn't make the top 100. I believe he did make the top 110, but I think he's better than Buda Baker. I think he had a really good year last year. I believe he had 15 passes defended and 4 picks. I mean, this is like we talk about these guys a lot, so I've got this stuff by memory now. So, I mean, he was a key piece to that Denver defense towards the end of the season. And again, like Shrikar and I said in our Broncos episode, I believe the Denver Broncos are the most improved team in the AFC. While I do give most credit to that, to I think Drew Lock's ability to uplift himself, I think this defense will take massive strides. And I've already brought up the playmakers in that episode. I mean, Bradley Chubb comes back. Von Miller, I think, will bounce back. Alexander Johnson was another one who I thought could even make his own Pro Bowl. But I think Justin Simmons would be a more safe pick, and I think it's an easier one to make just because we've already seen pretty stellar play. And I believe he made a second-team All-Pro. I believe so. He also made that. So he's getting the respect he deserves, especially in the advanced stats category. So I think Justin Simmons is definitely my pick here, and I think he helps this Broncos team make the playoffs next year.
It's also worth noting that as of now, Earl Thomas is out of the AFC, and that frees up a spot for Justin Simmons this year. Obviously, the last year, the two
Well,
free safeties.
he could get signed by there's a team,
That's true.
who's interested. So
That's true,
you
but
know,
I mean,
just saying.
yeah. But I mean, last year it was Minka Fitzpatrick and Earl Thomas for the free safeties. I
Mhm.
think that Justin Simmons has a chance to make it in Earl Thomas's spot, or even in Minka
Oh yeah.
Fitzpatrick's spot. I think that he could easily be the best free safety in the AFC this
Hmm.
year. And then switching over to the NFC, we've got offensive. This was my biggest reach, I think, of all of them. And just off last season, I don't think that many people will agree with me. I'm going to go with TJ Hawkinson, tight end for the Lions, because, like I mentioned with Quinn and Williams, we've seen what TJ Hawkinson can do. And I think that tight ends, it's also very hard for rookie tight ends to come in and be uber successful. And there's always a growing period and a growing pains for tight ends coming into the NFL, learning, everything they need to learn from blocking schemes to run fits and then just in the pass game in general. I think Hawkinson takes a big leap year 2, and I think that you could you could see like Mark Andrews last year took a huge jump, and I think that TJ Hawkinson has that level of jump next year, especially getting his quarterback back and Matt Stafford not having to play with, whoever they played with last year, David
David
Blau in
Blau,
one
man.
game. But I think that TJ Hawkinson capitalizes on his second year and capitalizes on having Matt Stafford back. I think he makes his first Pro Bowl.
I'm glad you kind of told people what his position was, what team he plays for, because not a lot of people know about TJ Hawkinson, not the casual NFL fan at least. And I still remember his first game. I mean, 5 catches, I believe it was 130 yards and a touchdown. He had an insane game against Arizona. And obviously, I think quarterback play did have a bit of a part in that, but I think he can easily improve his blocking. He was known as a receiving threat coming out of college, I believe. And while I'm always one to say never spend a first round pick on a tight end. I mean, it was clear cut that he was going to be the first tight end taken off the board that year. So, do I fault the Lions for taking him in the top 10 a little bit? But again, the talent is there. So, I can see that. Obviously, there is a tight end each year that just takes a leap. Obviously, it was Mark Andrews last year, and then the year before it was Eric Ebron. So, there's always that one tight end. And I think you made a good pick here. I mean, there are a lot of tight ends that I also see, like Tyler Higbee was one of that I thought of. Noah Fant potentially on the AFC side. But maybe switching it over to the team that he went off against, the Arizona Cardinals. My pick for the Pro Bowl, his first Pro Bowl in 2020, is going to be quarterback Kyler Murray. And, I have a friend who's probably watching this thinking, Anish is never high on Kyler Murray because I have Josh Allen above him. And Kyler Murray is a great quarterback. I don't have him in my top 15 yet because he's young. And I don't think there's a problem with that. I need to see more, and I think he will pass, quarterbacks like maybe Josh Allen. I think he passes Matt Stafford next year, potentially Dak. I mean, he could slide into my top 10. It really depends on how good he is. Like Lamar slid into my top 3. So, I mean, the sky's the limit for Kyler Murray. I just don't think he'll have that type of year, but obviously the weapons are there. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is there. I think Christian Kirk is a very solid wide receiver too. Larry Fitzgerald goes back to the slot, and he was pretty good there a couple years ago. So I think he kind of reestablishes his role there. Tight end situation is a bit murky, but that's okay. I think his offensive line also got a little bit better with Josh Jones. So I think his offense is a lot better. Oh, Kenyon Drake also. I think he's very underrated as a blocker. I think that's something that people don't give him credit for. And I think Kyler Murray, again, his versatility with his legs and his arm is just unmatched. And I love the way he throws. I think it's just
it looks
like a
so
quick
nice.
Release. Like I know, right? Like it looks so like quick
Effortless
and just
I mean, quarterbacks that have that, the quarterbacks that throw it like that, they tend to be very good. The quarterbacks that just look effortless when throwing the ball. You want to see that.
I mean, it's a perfect spiral every time. I'm like, how do you do that? And I've tried like mirroring it. I used to look at magazines with Russell Wilson to try and get my 2 fingers on the leg. But like Kyler Murray he'll run and his arm doesn't go fully back. So I'm just like, how is he still able to get enough velocity on it? But obviously he had a baseball background. So, could I see him making the Pro Bowl? Right off the bat, yeah. And also, I was talking with this about Jack. Obviously, there's some add-in factor, right? If the quarterback from the NFC makes the Super Bowl, then there's that replacement thing. But I think Kyler Murray could easily be one of the 3, and he's got enough talent to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, the NFC offensive Pro Bowl roster every year it looks very similar each year. I mean, there's really no wide receiver you can think of that hasn't made a Pro Bowl yet that will. Running backs, there's so many good running backs in the NFC, and so I think that quarterback and tight end are 2 spots that are decently open, and those are kind of the spots that obviously we went because the NFC is loaded.
Yeah, I mean, again, the top 3 wide receivers I think on everyone's list are playing in the NFC. Yeah. Same thing with running backs. I mean, CMC, Saquon, Zeke. I think those are everyone's 3 early picks.
Yeah. So then moving to the NFC defensive, this one I wanted to go Jalen Smith, but he has made a Pro Bowl. I was kind of disappointed when I saw that. And then right next to him, the other Smith, Roquan Smith, middle linebacker for the Bears, who in our episode with Chris from the Chicago Bears News, I said Roquan Smith is going to be my easy breakout pick for the Bears on defense, and I'm going to stick with that. I think he makes his first Pro Bowl as the leader of that underrated, I think, now Bears defense, because that defense is still extremely good, and I think people don't talk about it as much anymore. And Roquan Smith as the leader of that defense from the inside, and now that Luke Kuechly is gone, there's an open spot at the middle linebacker roster for the Pro Bowl in the NFC. I've got Roquan Smith taking that this year.
Again, when you said it, right when we were preparing for this, I was like, oh my God, how did I not think of that? Like, I love Roquan Smith too. I think he lives up to the hype. And again, we were talking about it with Chris too. I think this Bears defense is criminally underrated, dude. Like, I think this is a top 3 unit. I mean, look at their defensive line. Who are you stopping? I mean, Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, Akeem Hicks. I mean, like, that's just – and then we go to the linebackers. I mean, Roquan Trevathan is still there. Obviously, their secondary's got Eddie Jackson and Kyle Fuller. I mean, the team is literally loaded on defense. And think people are underrating them. Got teams like the Chargers over them. I've seen some people do that, and I know they're good on paper, but again, the Bears have shown it time in and time out that they can be great. So I think people are underrating this Bears defense, and I love the pick. But that being said, for my NFC defensive pick, I think this is probably my quote unquote reach of the Pro Bowl players that I made, because I think the three that I kind of have are a bit popular picks.
Yeah.
So, when Jack and I were kind of deciding it, I was narrowing it down to two Ohio State players, and Jack kind of aided me on one of them. I wanted to go, Chase Young was an option there, but I think there's a lot of NFC rushers, right, that Jack kind of helped me out with. There's Cam Jordan, Chandler Jones, Danielle Hunter, list goes on. I think, again, Khalil Mack is another one.
Nick Bosa,
yeah, Nick Bosa. How could I forget him? So I think what I did for the NFC side was, again, I kind of mentioned the disparity with corners, right? So I went with Jeff Okudah, cornerback out of Ohio State for the Detroit Lions. And I was looking at this article by PFF who stated that he was as dominant as Jalen Ramsey was at Florida State. And Jalen Ramsey, I believe, went in the top 5. And you know what? As someone who watched him, I couldn't disagree. I mean, the dude was insane. Like, I'm literally reading it here. He out of 400 snaps, less than 15 times did he allow, less than 8 times did he allow someone to go for more than 15 yards. I mean, like that's crazy to me. And that was half that. I think it was 6 times the 15-yard plus game. And those 6 games were half his yards allowed the entire year. I mean, that is absurd to me. 9 passes defended, was 5th in the entire NCAA. The dude was a stud, but he was literally his own island. I think he was the best man-to-man corner I think I've ever seen in college football. A little bit of bias there, but I don't watch as much as Jack, obviously. So, I mean, the skills that I saw displayed in games like Michigan, obviously the big game, and Wisconsin and Clemson, he locked down. And he is also a very underrated hitter.
Yeah,
he is a very hard hitter. I mean, he plays physical, and he plays way taller than he is. I still remember the hit he had on T. Higgins. I will say it time and time again. It is a fumble. It was a fumble. It should have been called a fumble, and that could have given us the win. But again, he's a criminally underrated hitter. And for the Lions, obviously, we've had Slay make the All-Pro team in 2017. He's been a consistent Pro Bowler. So why can't Okudah fill his shoes? I think he obviously is going to go up against some great receivers in Adam Thielen, Devontae Adams, and I think he's going to hold his own a little bit there. Obviously, he's not going to maybe fully stop him, but as a rookie, but I think he's going to develop into one of the greatest man-to-man corners we may ever see.
Yeah, I think that there's always rookies each year that surprise and make the Pro Bowl. Last year, less than other years, but I think, I could definitely see Jeff Okudah. I kind of helped you out on that decision a little bit.
Yeah.
But I completely agree with that one, especially for a rookie. I think that he could be one of the front runners. Like you said, Chase Young. There are a lot of good NFC pass rushers, so I think Okudah in the NFC as a rookie might be the easiest pick.
Yeah, it's because again, right? Like, there's just disparities between both positions. Yep. I mean, it goes receivers again for the NFC side, corners for the AFC side, and I think that's just how the NFL will work. I mean, there's always good players in different conferences, and to kind of wrap it all up, I think that it's very hard to predict which players will make their first bowl. But I think these were some guys that we looked at and said, okay, they definitely have a chance after seeing what they've done last year, and they're young. I think all these players that we have are young. I've got 2 second years and a couple third years. I mean, I think they're only going to grow. So to kind of wrap this all up, please go check out our socials down below. Check out our website. Check out our Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And again, we have a 200 subscriber goal, so please help us out. We are very close, and we've got some gifts on the way once we hit 200. So we'd really appreciate you guys to hit that button. Jack, you got anything to say before we take off?
Yeah, if you guys have certain players that you think will make their first Pro Bowl this year, don't be afraid to put it in the comments. We want to hear what you guys are thinking, and we'll go down there and talk with you guys about it. We want to know who you think will make their first Pro Bowl this year.
So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See you.